Hello, I'm Lisa Bowerman and I play Bernie Summerfield, and welcome to Audio Heads podcast.
Hello and welcome to Geeks Assembled. It's the end of the world and we know it. It's the end of the world and we know it. It's the end of the world and we know it. And we feel fine. And the Martians have invaded and Shepperton is fallen and it's awful and there's bloodshed and people being sucked into pits and stuff. So, I mean, what are we going to do? We're going to review it. That's what we're going to do because we're big Finnish lovers. And anyway, that's what we do here on Audio Heads, a product of Geeks Assembled. Anyway, let's review this thing. Hey, Beef Dad, what do you think of the Martian Invasion H.G. Wells on Big Finish audio?
I really enjoyed it. The performances were brilliant, but then they always are. The soundscape was absolutely fantastic. Absolutely incredible. The music, the sound effects, everything was just absolutely brilliant. The adaptation, I mean, Nick Briggs has done a brilliant job on the adaptation of this, and yeah, I loved it. I particularly the balloon scene. I really loved the balloon scene and the ship. You know, I feel a bit sorry for her mother-in-law that got slung out of the balloon, so that they could lift a bit higher. But yeah, and the ship, when the ship was going for the Martian, that was brilliant. That was just so superb. And one of the things that they did, of course, which a lot of the people skip, is the fact that the Martians start herding human beings into places because they are going to be the Martian food supply, and that tended to get ignored a lot in previous adaptations I've seen and heard. But yeah, brilliantly done, and just, I mean, yeah, I know it lasts almost 3 hours, but it's 3 hours just brilliantly spent, and it just flies by.
Okay, how about you, Tim? What did you think of Martian Invasion of Earth?
Honestly, I found the whole thing a bit underwhelming. To me, not being that familiar with the book or the film, it seems to me like more of a visual story than an audio one, and it kind of suffered for that. I think because you had a lot of descriptive dialogue, sometimes it sounded a bit out of place. I mean, they gave it a good try. They did the best they could with it, I think. And of course, it was very well made and acted and designed. But I mean, to me, I think the story just isn't that interesting. Basically, Martians invade, and then they die off before, you know, either they complete their conquer or before anybody stops them. It just kind of ends. And I think that's a weakness in the story. I mean, as far as this story goes, I think I found it a bit weak compared to the other stories by Wells that I thought were far more interesting and entertaining. Again, I'm stressing that this is actually a good, Big Finish does a really good job all the time, and they did a good job with this, but I just don't think the story is that interesting itself. It seems to me to have been better as a film than an audio.
Okay. Lee Wilson, what do you think of this thing, Lee?
Well, yeah, I can see where Tim's coming from, but you see, everybody is used to the 1950s version, what had really nothing to do with this story. Then they had the Tom Cruise version in the 21st century, which really rewrit this story. This one tried to stick to the original H.G. Wells novel, and for me, it did do its job. If you ever read H.G. Wells, this is the closest you will get. The closest. They had to leave things out, of course, but this is the closest you will get to the H.G. Wells original novel. I do agree with some things what Tim says. It doesn't. Some of it drags a bit. The talking bit, the main characters leading up to the Martian invasion, but when it gets started, it is absolutely brilliant. The soundscape, as Beef Dad said, is just absolutely out of this world. It's a very good adaptation of what H.G. Wells saw and wrote. Forget the 1950s, forget Tom Cruise's version. This is what H.G. Wells wrote. And for that, I enjoyed it, because I have read H.G. Wells' version, and this is so damn close. So over to you, Susan.
Okay, I've got questions. Instead of we're going to answer these questions one at a time. What did you think of the fact that they put in H.G. Wells as a character? Let's start with Tim.
Well, I'm not familiar with the book. Was the book not written that way, or did they just give the character a name?
They took the main character who was nameless in the book.
So they made it like supposedly a bit autobiographical,
yeah.
I guess, sort of. I mean, I at the end of the day, in the story, it doesn't really matter what the character's name is. It's just that's the name he goes by in the story. It happens to be the same as the writer of the book. So I don't really think it makes a difference one way or the other.
Okay. Beef Dad, what did you think?
It was fine using Herbert as the name, because when H.G. Wells wrote it, it was written almost in places like a diary, and it worked. It worked for me. It worked perfectly fine.
Okay, cool. What about you, Lee? What did you think of H.G. Wells as a character?
Well, it didn't take away from the story, because, as I said, the main character was Colin Herbert. They never mentioned his surname until his brother was involved later on, when he was called Mr. Wells.
Yeah.
Then you sort of put things together. It didn't. To me personally, I wasn't bothered about that. I thought, yeah, that's a good little nod to from Mr. Nick Briggs there. It didn't take away from the story at all.
Well, here's my opinion. I really enjoyed the fact that they put him in, because he's been put into other things. He was put into the Sixth Doctor, Time of the Rani, or whatever of the Rani. That was pretty amazing. And
Time Lash.
It was Time Lash? Okay, Time Lash. Sorry. And then he's also been put into other things sprinkled around in popular culture, and I just find that really cool. I think that he is a writer, is an amazing writer, and I enjoyed this story. It was so fast. Oh my gosh, 3 hours just went by, no time at all. It was incredible. Okay, question number 2 of this podcast. Compare this, if you've seen or heard it, to the Jeff Wayne one done at Wembley, or at I can't remember where else Jeff Wayne did his War of the Worlds. Yeah, please compare it. Start with Lee.
Well, Jeff Wayne, you cannot knock Jeff Wayne's musical because that is just effing awesome.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And to be honest, it doesn't really relate to what H.G. Wells wrote.
And it does.
No, because you got the music. Jeff Wayne's is more musical. It's more musical infused. This is more narration, not more scientific. You know what I mean? But I can see. I love Jeff Wayne's. I just love it. I mean, I've got a double limited edition CD somewhere of the album, and with Richard Burton's "Who Would Have Believed," but that it was. At least they got that little bit into the story at the beginning of it. You know, who would have believed that? You know, life from Mars or whatever. That's brilliant. There's no comparing. Jeff Wayne's. I think we're gonna have to review this sometime, Susan. Jeff Wayne's War of the World.
All right.
I think we should do.
Sounds brilliant. Sounds like a plan.
We may not get many members on the cast for that, but I'm there. Yeah, there's no comparison. There's Jeff Wayne's version of it, and there's H.G. Wells.
Okay.
To be honest, but both are good.
Okay, Tim, have you seen or heard Jeff Wayne's version, and can you compare them?
No, I haven't. I've heard the Orson Welles radio drama from the 50s, or was it earlier than that? It was earlier than that, wasn't it? Was it the 40s? The one that scared the hell out of everybody because they thought it was real. That's actually a far superior production, I would say, mainly because I guess it's a product of its time. I don't have a problem with what they tried to do here. I just don't think I don't think the story works on an audio level the way they presented it here. I think it would have been far better as a film, probably. And again, they gave it a good try. They're big finish, and they don't mess around. They do a good job. Like you said, the sound effects and the all that is all very well, but I just found it really, really boring, and I didn't really care too much for the characters. I just thought, okay, and you don't really get any insight into what the Martians want or who they are or what they're doing. It's just they just come in and stomp everybody. And, I mean, that's the story he wanted to tell. I just don't think it's that interesting, I guess, as an audio.
Okay, Jeffrey, have you seen or heard Jeff Wayne stuff, and also answer?
Well, to be honest, I've never heard the Jeff Wayne one or seen it.
How about the 50s one? The 40s, 50s one?
What film?
No, the radio play.
Oh, the Orson Welles one. Yeah, I've heard some of that. They made it much more current rather than telling a story in the past, as it were. It was narrated as it was happening, which is one of the reasons why it blew the mind of the American public, because they didn't realise what was on, switched on their radio, heard what was going on, and thought, oh, Jesus Christ, we're being invaded. And of course, the way Orson Welles does things here, I mean, the man was a genius. But yes, I've heard excerpts of it. But as I say, I always wanted to see the Jeff Wayne version, but
okay,
never got around to it.
Well, then we'll pencil that in at some point, because it is truly surreal and fun and excellent music.
I've probably heard some of the music.
Yeah, I bet you have.
Yeah, as sort of in passing, as it were.
Sure. Okay, your favorite bits, or your unfavorite bits, or your bits where you thought that things needed to be changed, sped up, slowed down, whatever. Let's start with Jeffrey. Start with Beef Dad again.
Okay, bits I liked. I loved the balloon flight.
Oh,
As and the throwing out of the basically dead mother-in-law. that was just superb.
Was she dead though?
Possibly. I mean, she was definitely on her last knockings. As I say, I loved the bit where the ships attacked them. That was really good. But there was a couple of descriptive bits. One of them was when they described them herding people to basically a sort of depression in the ground, black hole in the ground, which is where they were herding them like cattle, and they were obviously going to be used as a food source. I loved the description of the lights on Mars when they were taking off, and it seems that they've also invaded Venus, which is nice for the Venusians. They need some friends. And the other one that really got me was the bit with the curate. Hywel Morgan playing the curate was just absolutely perfect. It's amazing how in all these science fiction films you get a curate and they go totally and utterly gaga. They always do. And yeah, it's just really good. Lucy Briggs-Owen as Amy was smashing. She really was. Richard Armitage playing Herbert was just brilliant. He was just amazing. And Helen Goldwyn as Agatha was, she was just incredible. I don't think really there was a weak part in this for me. And as I say, I read the book when I was a young lad. So you're talking about almost 60 years ago when I read the book, and it made a big impression on me as a kid. And this made a big impression on me as an old git.
Oh, you're funny. Okay, let's go to Lee. What were your favorite bits? Yeah,
Well,
etc., etc.
See, Beef Dad's not just an old git, he's a grumpy old git as well. And he wants to be. Yes, you see, he agrees with that. Yeah, what everybody knows about the Martian Invasion of Earth, or as everybody knows it, the War of the Worlds, but we're not allowed to call it that because of the copyright what an American film company owns. Every movie version of it is being set in America. The 1950s, the Tom Cruise version set in America. It was set in Victorian England in the book, and that's the way it should have been. I do love the priest, as Beef Dad said, it was the cleric or whatever it was called, the curate. The way he descends into sort of madness, that is just so awesome. The balloon trip as well, kicking her off, even though nobody's sure if she's dead or not. That's brilliant. For me, every actor in this was brilliant, apart from the lead. For me, Richard Armitage. What shall we say? It was a bit the way it came.
Wooden. It's kind of wooden. Wooden.
Yes, yeah. It was dull. It was.
Could you call him Oaken?
I don't know if he just came into the studio and just read, I'll do this, I'll do that. But to me, it was just very, very dull. There was no life there. Every other artist in this, Lucy Briggs-Owen was absolutely amazing as Amy. Everybody else, but for me, Richard Armitage just seemed out of place. I'm not knocking the actor. He may have had an off day, or maybe the direction just said to him, "Can you play it differently?" I don't know, but Richard Armitage sucked in this, to be honest. My opinion on it. Over to you, Susan.
Okay, I pass it along to Tim, and I ask, what are your favorite bits or your least favorite bits?
I would just say I agree with Lee 100% that that performance wasn't very good, and I don't know why. I think that's another reason I found the thing kind of a drag. I think I didn't even realize that was Armitage. He's a very good actor. I think what it is he was just a little too melodramatic, or his delivery of the lines was just, it felt slightly over the top, and it made me not really sympathize with him, the character. It made me kind of want to poke my finger and laugh at him. So I would say that is a flaw that I didn't really realize until you mentioned it, that it was a pretty wooden performance. But on the other hand, I mean, like you said, the rest of the cast was very good. I didn't really have very many favorite bits, I don't think. Like I said, I'm now that I've actually listened to the actual story, I don't think I'm very fond of the story. I don't think it's a very good one. I think it could have been, I mean, compared to Wells' other work, it's just a bit by the numbers. Martians invade, and then oops, they die, and that's it. I mean, you really don't have any background into what it is they're trying to accomplish. I mean, it might be there in between the lines, but I mean, it's also, you don't really have very relatable characters, do you? I mean, they're just there. They run away. They don't really accomplish anything to defeat the beasties. So I mean, it's I just don't think it's a very good story compared to the other stuff that we've discussed, like, the other stories that we've discussed, The Invisible Man and a couple of the other ones were really, really impressive stories. This one just seems to be a bit unfinished.
Excuse me. Well, my favorite bits were the bit where they are on the shore and they're talking about swimming out to the paddle boat, and you can see there's so much hope in that scene, and then boosh, it's crushed, and the heat ray burns the water, boils the water, and I just thought that I mean, there were moments where you just were like, oh my gosh, they're gonna get him, they're gonna knock this one down, they're gonna solve this problem, but then they never do. And I guess that's really what kept it moving so fast for me, is that having known, the basic story, I have to admit I saw the American version of this before, and I also heard the radio play as a child, and it was one of those reasons that I got into science fiction. I guess let's leave it at that. The paddle boat, when they were aiming, they sounded so hopeful, and also after they threw the mother-in-law out of the balloon, the heat ray slices the balloon, and you hear them fall, and the fact that they don't die is remarkable. I mean, it's just, there was so much cool things going on, where you get hopeful and then poof, your hopes are dashed. And I guess that's why, he resolved the whole story that they were killed by the microbial life on planet Earth, in our blood and in our air and everywhere else. But there were little bits of hope sprinkled liberally throughout.
They should have washed their hands, the dirty Martians.
That's right. Always carry your hand sanitizer, folks. So if you're visiting planet Earth, you need to keep your hand sanitizer, and
We are filthy animals. We are.
and don't breathe our air. Whatever. We all are carrying contagions. Anyway, so let's finish up and rate this thing. Okay, let's start with Lee. What would you rate it, and do your final words, please?
Yeah, I was sort of disappointed. I know where Tim's coming from. He was so disappointed. The threat was there, blah, all of that, and then, oh yes, the Martians got infected by our germs, and they fell from the sky. Oh, well, that was it. There was no lead up to that. That was just brought in straight away. It was a bit of a downer for me on that story-wise, but that's how it was in the book. They should have fleshed it out, I think, a bit more. Yeah, and Richard Armitage's performance, I'm not knocking the actor, was a bit dull. And I hope if Nicholas Briggs ever listens to these, because I know he's liked this, because I have said on Twitter that we are doing this and he's given us the thumbs up. I hope if he ever watches this, don't take it to offence, but Richard Armitage's performance wasn't for me personally. So for that reason, I am going to give it an 8. It's not a bad score, but it's not a number 10. Over to you, Susan.
Okay, how about you, Jeffrey? Beef Dad, please. How about that?
What everybody is seemingly forgetting is that this was written during the time that Queen Victoria was on the throne of England. So you are talking around, the 1890s it was written. For something like this to be written in that time is pretty bloody incredible. That man had an incredible mind. And yeah, of course, there was very little that the population could do about the Martians apart from run away. I mean, you are talking Victorian England. They were using sort of guns, but they weren't sort of armor-piercing guns like they have these days. And yeah, they had limited capabilities of defense, and you have to realize that when you listen to this, and that comes through. And as I say, what they did, which they didn't bother to do in the 50s or the later ones, was show the Martians herding the human beings because they were going to be a food source. So that gives you a possible reason for why the Martians were invading Earth, because they needed a new food source. I would have.
How about just a rating? Can I just inspire you to move that way?
Young Mr. Armitage didn't do that bad a job. I quite enjoyed it. As I say, it's not going to be. It's not a screamy, panicky sort of part. Rating. It gets a 9.5.
Cool. And Tim, what would your final thoughts and score be if you're there? Okay. I guess my final thoughts were, we've reviewed the movie and we have reviewed the audio now, and the movie was terribly unimpressive. I think our median rating was about a 7 or an 8, And as I recall, I didn't rate that one very highly, but I enjoy the story, and I enjoy the story so much. I've basically seen all the things that I can get my hands on that were you know, the versions of Martian Invasion, War of the Worlds, that and I enjoy it, and so I'm going to give it a 10, just because it's terrific. And I disagree. I think Richard Armitage did a great job. I think that there was plenty of hope that Wells sprinkled in there, and I do agree that what hope did a Victorian England have against someone who can travel interplanetarily and in space with huge weapons that nobody had ever imagined before, and Wells imagined them. Oh my gosh, did he imagine them? And they were pretty intense. Anyway, so Tim, what would your final say and score be, please?
Well, maybe Wells's message was, there you go, your empire's not that big. But I mean, to the Victorians. Anyway, I would give it a 8, because it's a big finished production and it's very well made. It's very well done. It's not their fault if I don't dig the story that much. So I will give it an 8.
All right, thanks. And thanks, gentlemen, for being here and for being the humans. And just know that the Martians were running out of their own little Martian people chattel on Mars. And they hadn't met the Ice Warriors, and they hadn't met the little Greys, and so they were really pretty much needing to come to Earth. And also Earth looks so cool. Oh my gosh. They're like, oh, we like that one. We're going to go see them. Look at that planet.
Is Earth really cool, though?
Oh, it looks just freaking gorgeous from space.
I've never been to space, Susan. I'll take your word for that.
I've never been either, but I've dreamed about it and stuff, and I know that the planet, when you look at it from from the moon, is gorgeous, so gorgeous, and I bet it's just pretty as a little blue dot in the Martian telescopes. But anyway, let's just leave it at that, and come back again and in a fortnight, and we'll do some more audio reviews here on Audioheads. And join our Facebook public group, like us on Twitter, follow us on Twitter, like us on Instagram and Tumblr, and reblog us, and just enjoy all of our stuff. And join the Beef Dad fan club. As always, I encourage you to join the Beef Dad fan club, because he's really cool. Anyway, one of these days, everybody gets a fan club, because everybody's amazing, but Beef Dad is really doubly amazing. So anyway, thanks.
Beef Dad and his ego is just.
Yeah, well, it's worth it,
He's worth it.
It's worth it. Anyway, guys, have fun. Have a really great day, and we'll talk again pretty soon. Okay? What?
Said I'm blushing.
Oh, sweet.